But some days you're a therapist. Some days you're a matchmaker. Some days you're a problem solver. I mean, every day you're a problem solver.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much to it that you gain from experience and that you gain from having relationships. But the big thing about real estate, the profession that we're in with housing, is that it is in the physical world. And yeah, I know that AI and robotics are going to bring that all into the physical world as well. And so maybe we'll all end up just living in the Matrix. But I do think that the human connection and the physical component is unique about what we do. And then there's all the like financing and the regulation and having to navigate all of it, that for now, at least, I think there's still a very central role. So I think the people who are successful in our industry in the next 5 to 10 years, or maybe let's say 2 to 5 years, since everything's changing so quickly, are going to be the people that figure out how to embrace and incorporate the ability to do what they do at scale without losing that kind of personal lens and that reason why.
Welcome to Housing Matters, the podcast that covers everything real estate, from buying your first home to building your investment portfolio. Hosted by Matt Pouliot of Pouliot Real Estate. Yes, that's me. Each episode brings expert insights, smart strategies, and real talk on housing and affordability. If it's about real estate, it matters here. Today, I'm really thrilled to have joining us Aaron Chadbourne. He's a designated broker and owner of Demetria Real Estate, serving buyers and sellers throughout Greater Portland and Southern Maine, including Portland, Gorham, Westbrook, Scarborough, South Portland, and Buxton. Licensed since 2002. Oh, that was 3 years before I graduated from high school.
Well,
Aaron.
the rule in Maine is that you have to be 18 years of age and a high school graduate. So I took the licensing course before I graduated. And then the day after I graduated from high school, drove up to Augusta, got the license.
Of course you did. Yeah. I can't wait to dig into this episode. Aaron has helped hundreds of Maine families navigate the biggest transitions, from buying a first home and finding more space for a growing family to downsizing, relocating, or preparing a home for sale. His team consistently handles 30 to 50 million in annual sales volume, giving clients access to extensive market knowledge and proven strategies. Aaron's noted for being a skilled negotiator, thoughtful listener, and creative problem solver. In 2026, Aaron was named Realtor of the Year by the Greater Portland Board of Realtors, recognizing his leadership and service to the profession. He's served as president of the Greater Portland Board of Realtors and holds leadership positions at the state and national levels with Realtor organization. But before returning to the family real estate business, Aaron graduated from Harvard College, Harvard Law School, and Harvard Business School. He's got more degrees than a thermometer. He worked for McKinsey and Company and served as senior policy advisor to Maine Governor Paul LePage, which is where I got to know him first. While his background is unique, his approach is simple. Listen carefully, provide honest advice, and help clients make smart decisions with confidence. When he's not working with clients, Aaron enjoys traveling, supporting local community organizations, and spending time with family and friends. Man, I've been looking forward to this episode for a long time. Thanks for being here, Aaron.
It's good to see you. Thank you for having me.
So I'm going to jump right into it. You've had a really, unique career that spans consulting, law, business, state government, and now real estate. Can you walk us through your background and your connection to Maine and what ultimately brought you back to build by Maine Real Estate?
So my family was in real estate when I was growing up. And it's interesting because both my parents were teachers. My dad taught elementary school and my mom taught at the high school level. And my mom got burnt out of teaching high school phys ed. She was a great coach. She won state championships and she got burnt out. And someone approached her and said, you know what, I think you'd be great at selling real estate. She said, I don't know the first thing about it. And as she got into it, what she realized is that your house is usually your biggest financial asset. And for her, talking to people, learning about the buying and selling process, she said, well, that's just like with your kids. You used to entrust me with your kids. Now you entrust me with your home. And a home is really the foundation for so much in your life. And so it was a really great fit for her. She went into real estate when I was very, very young, and my sister as well. And she had this goal of when she went into real estate, her why was she wanted to make sure that when my sister and I wanted to go to college, if we ever wanted to go to college, she was first in her family to go to college. She paid her way through the University of Maine. My dad did as well. And she said, if my kids ever want to go to college, I want for them to be able to go anywhere they want with money not being an issue. That was her why. And so we grew up in the family business. We grew up, we were trained to answer the phone at like 5 and 6 years old. We knew how to take a message. We knew how to repeat the name back and get it spelled correctly and double check the phone number. But that's what we did at home, because back then you'd have to call people at home. We had landlines then. You didn't have your cell phone. You weren't attached to every device. But we learned all of those skills. We were helping make the brochures. We were going door to door with the door hangers. We were, hand addressing the postcards. We learned the basics of the business growing up. And we had the great fortune that when my sister applied to college, she was accepted at Yale University. When I was accepted to college, I was accepted to Harvard. And so real estate really fueled our ability to do whatever we wanted. It was something that was always part of our lives. We always understood the value of owning your own home, and we understood how it can really transform families, how it builds community. And so it's always been fundamental to who we are, but it was also a family business. It was a way that we supported each other and supported our dreams. And so I was able to go to college and graduate debt free. Now, I came home every summer and sold real estate. As I said, I got my real estate license the day after I graduated high school, sold my first house at 18, applied for my first loan, my first mortgage at 18, which let's talk about why more people don't do that. Let's get back to that because I think that's what we should be focusing on. But so real estate's always been fundamental. But then I went off and I went to Harvard Law School, Harvard Business School. I worked at McKinsey. I had ideas of what I was going to do. And if you'd have asked me, I probably would have said, like with so many people that grow up in a family business, that I would never go into real estate. But in the back of my mind, it's always been there. And so I remember my first year at Harvard Law School, someone was telling me what they were going to make as a first year associate at one of the top law firms in New York. And I thought, and I calculated in my head how many houses I could sell and make that same amount of money. And I was like, so why would you have that lifestyle?
I'm curious, how many was it? Do you recall?
At the time, it was probably 10.
More.
No,
10?
it was probably 10.
Yeah.
It's probably if I sold 10 houses, again, without splitting commission and all this other stuff.
Right.
But the math in my head was I could sell 10 houses and I could make that much money.
Yeah.
And so, and that was probably in 2011 that I was doing the math.
When the average price in Maine was like $127,000.
The average price in Augusta was $127,000. Down in Southern Maine, it's probably closer to 300 at the time.
Blue collar up here.
But there are regional markets in our state. Our license works statewide, but there are very different markets moving, and there are different segments within each geography. But so when I made the decision to leave McKinsey, because I was burnt out as a management consultant. I was working with the world's smartest people on some of the world's biggest problems, but I just missed having a sense of community. And I worked with a leadership coach, and we identified that the places in my life where I had been the most kind of in the flow, most connected to who I am and my values and my excitement were places when I was very deeply connected to my local community. And so he said, you either have to choose for your community to be your colleagues at work, the fact that you travel all the time, you have to find your comfort in your clients and in your work colleagues and in the different practices you can build in the company. And I was like, but that's not the same thing as like your mailman knowing who you are and you knowing their kids. It's not the same thing as when you walk into your favorite bar, they already start making you drink. It's not the same thing as, being able to, yesterday I was at a ribbon cutting for a picnic pavilion that the local realtors were able to come together and help the town fund at the bike track, and feeling like you've changed it and you've grown, and then you see those kids enjoying it, you know who they are, you know who their parents are. That was something I really missed. And that was my decision to move back to Maine. I was living in DC, decided I was going to move back to either Boston or Maine. And I told my mom I was applying to jobs either on the Hill in DC, for companies in Boston. She said, why not Maine? I said, well, there's nothing interesting to do in Maine. And she said, Paul LePage just got reelected. Why don't you give him a call and see if he needs any help?
Interesting.
And so I did. I mean, in a roundabout way, Kurt Adams introduced me to Patrick Woodcock, who was the governor's director of his energy office at the time. Had coffee with Patrick. He said, why don't you come up? We'll give you a tour. I came up for
he now runs the state chamber, Patrick does.
And we're so lucky to have him there.
Yeah.
I think he's doing an excellent job. He was a terrific hire. He's taking the chamber in the right direction. But Patrick brought me up. I thought I was actually just getting a tour of the State House, and I went and sat down with the chief of staff, deputy chief of staff, and chief counsel to Governor LePage. We were having a conversation. They told me about some jobs they had open. I turned to Carly and said, well, you've had both of these jobs. What do you think it takes to be better at one than another? And she said, well, who's interviewing who here? Which was my first clue that it was a job interview. And then got the great opportunity to work for Governor LePage for most of his second term on issues having to do with economic development, education, tax policy, and helping to run the government, make it more responsive to voter and taxpayer needs. And then when it was about time that he was going to be termed out, my mom was diagnosed with a form of blood cancer. And so kind of family comes first. And so I went and backstopped her business, and she had built such a great company. And one of the things that she thought about as she was facing her own mortality was, what's going to happen to my clients in the future? There are
Wow.
these families that I built these deep relationships with. Who's going to take care of them? And it was something that mattered a lot to her. And I was like, well, you built an amazing business. And if I look at the other businesses I could do in Maine or practicing law or being in politics, all of the different stuff I did, like this is meaningful work. Meaningful because it's a legacy for my mom, for the business she built, the brand she was. Her name, Demetria, is still central on my company. But it's also big to like how real estate transforms lives. It's a fun way to stay connected in a community. It's a fun way when you can get involved in development, you can get involved in brokerage, you can get involved in any certain way. There's so much flexibility. And I just love spending time with people. And I think when you get invited into someone's home, it's a huge privilege because they let you in on kind of every important aspect of their life. You see how it connects.
It's a pretty intimate experience when you think about it. I remember one time I was showing a buyer a home and we go to the front door and, I open the door and they're like, where are the sellers? And I'm like, well, they're not here. We're looking around, they're like, we're going to look around inside their home without them here. I'm like, yeah, that's how it works. Like, it'd be kind of weird if they're here. You'd probably feel awkward, They're like, well, we kind of feel awkward going inside, looking around without them here. I'm like, that's the way it works. Okay, let's go. And after a while, they were used to it. But it occurred to me after that, I was like, wow, we're being given the keys to people's kingdom, right? That's like their nest, like the safe space, right?
We get desensitized too to like opening closets and opening doors. People, the first time they come in, they're like, I'm going to open someone else. You're like, yeah, you have to figure out if this works for you. But it's a position of trust, and people will trust you with their divorce, the death of a family and a loved one. I've had people write into their will that they would sell their house with us, and that they should call us, or they even put our contact information in their security box with their legal documents. It's a big relationship thing.
But I also think that you guys are kind of next level compared to where some of the industry has gone. We've talked about this before. It's almost like it's pay to play in a lot of ways with the Zillows and the Redfins and the like of the world, where, it's like whoever answers the phone and has a pulse fastest is somehow in the eyes of Zillow or whatever the qualified individual. Whereas you got people like you that are going to ribbon cuttings and building decades worth of relationships with people to the point they'll write in their will to say, use this. I mean, that's trust at a whole different level,
But it's a relationship business, and that's what we've chosen to do. And I know I could probably make more money and have higher transaction volume if I did it a little bit differently, but I don't necessarily want to be like the realtor on the shopping cart or the one that's spending all this money for buying leads. I really enjoy the part. I like to know why you called me, and I like to be because that's someone that you know and that you like and that you trusted and liked us and vouch for us. And so that's what keeps it fun. It makes it a professional services advisory relationship, a relationship of trust. And so I tend to invest my dollars. I do put my face on the side of a big moving truck, so I'm not opposed to it. Although it did take that, I will say, making the transition from like McKinsey, Harvard, all of that sort of stuff, where so much of what you do is business to business work, where you're
based on credentials.
You're meant to be anonymous. I mean, you're behind yourself. It's based on credentials or resume or whatever else. Resume in this is who are you and what have you done lately and how have you helped other people. But this idea of putting like my name in someone's yard, I mean, you're a recovering politician. You guys had to do. I say realtors and people who run for office, they have a lot in common, right? It's you put your name on a sign in someone's yard connected to a geography. So I've recruited a lot of politicians to go into real estate and realtors to go into politics because I think that's similar. But for me, it was a big adjustment to be marketing myself as the product, myself. And that was the biggest adjustment, having my face on anything. Although I think it's good because now I walk around, people see me and they ask me about real estate.
Right.
They say, oh, you're the guy that's doing this, or, so I've had to make that mental adjustment, but it's really rewarding. And again, the fact that my mom's name is still on the company, that she had these decades of relationships, that she approached it like, you don't have to be the smartest. You just have to apply. You have to learn from other people and apply it in your market. So I'm gratified every day. I hear stories about what she meant to people and what she did for them. And it's great to pay that forward and to think about how that shapes the next generation of our family.
Yeah. I mean, you just nailed it right with the fact that you're willing to, as a real estate agent, put your name out there, have it in the yard, and everybody knows what's going on. There's like a lot of accountability. It's interesting. I was watching a podcast or YouTube recently. Steve Jobs was addressing a group of students at MIT in 1992. Now, this is before he went back to Apple, okay? And he had Next Computer, right? Which ultimately was his Trojan horse to get back into Apple after they had kicked him out. And it's a whole group of students. I don't know how many because I didn't pay in the audience, but he's like, okay, what do you do? And the majority of them were like consultants, And he's like, oh, it's a terrible thing to waste, And someone in the audience is like, why? Consultants go, they provide value. He's like, yeah, you may go, but it's kind of like a banana peel, it's like really, really thin and just kind of like spread out. You get to see all these different things that are going on in a company. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you make your recommendation, they take your recommendation, and then you get your paycheck and you leave. He's like, you don't have to worry about whether or not it actually worked. I mean, maybe if you want future work from them, but you could always go find somebody else to consult for. You don't have to stay up at night to make sure payroll is being made. You don't have to live the accountability of your decision. And in real estate, in a lot of ways, we do. It's like it's our name out there. If we don't get the job done, obviously, it's like, did you sell the home, or did you help the buyer successfully get the property? And if you didn't, like, there's nobody to blame, It's on us. And in time, I think I've probably become desensitized to that and maybe don't think about it as much. But it's really fascinating to me, the number of people that go through their entire life without having that kind of an accountability. And I think, to what you're saying, it's like, well, it's very rewarding to be in a career in which it can be financially beneficial if you do a good job, but also you get the pride that comes from being accountable for your work in a very public way.
In defense of my former colleagues, I do think that, and I had the great fortune of working at some of the world's most prestigious consulting firms at McKinsey and at Bain.
And I'm not bringing this up because you were at McKinsey.
But seriously, like I think as a consultant, like I think the people at the higher end, like the more senior partners, they do those relationships and they have lifelong relationships and they actually grow with senior executives. They can do it. But as you're coming up through the ranks, you're project based and project to project. The cool thing for that in that lifestyle, which I'll tell you and I will defend, is that for most jobs, in order to work on a really hard problem in a different industry or in a different function, you'd have to like quit your job, move somewhere else, get a new job, on board, all this other stuff. In consulting, I had the great fortune of being able to travel anywhere in the world, work for any executive that I wanted. And especially young in my career where I was undefined, I could switch industries, I could switch functions, and I'm living in the same place. I'm getting paid the same amount of money, which was a very, very comfortable lifestyle. So there is a thing to do it, but you're absolutely right that there's no substituting for owning it. And that's why as you go in these firms, a lot of them are partnerships, so they have a stake in the company. But when you own your own business, when you own your own line of work, when you have the accountability for whether or not, how it is when you have as a small business owner, when you have payroll to meet, like you have to have a certain amount of money coming in every month. Otherwise, like a lot of people aren't getting paid. Families are relying on that, and you have to like get comfortable with that. Then you have to know like that there's just an accountability that comes from that. There's a drive. And if you don't have confidence in it, if you don't have a solid foundation, I'm sure it drives some people nuts. I don't spend time worrying about it because we have a system, we have a machine, and I have early warning signs, the milestones, the metrics that you watch to make sure that you stay on track every month, every week, every day, that you're hitting them. But there's also just so much more, I think, reward when you're doing it for yourself. And when you are clever at solving problems, if you benefit from what happens when you solve them, you're invested in the outcome and you think, how can I do it again? And well, how can I do it differently? And that's why I've been inspired by some of the journey that you're taking right now and some of the different businesses you're doing, because again, you're applying that same thing in different areas. And just like you did when you were serving the legislature, like you do in your business here, and like you're doing in some of your entrepreneurial endeavors, I think it's exciting to take that and then to own the consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fun to build things. You know what I mean? Like we get one chance at this life, and it really is what we make it in for many people. Like for us, we're blessed to just have the agency to do that. You know what I mean? Like what a terrible thing to waste. That's kind of like what Steve Jobs has said. It's like, like nothing wrong with consulting per se, but like, are you really going to live the life to its fullest by putting yourself out there? And I've always admired you as a real estate agent and for other professional capacities as well, because you're really willing to give it 110% all the time. And unfortunately, in any business, whether it's real estate or government or whatever, there's many people that just show up to check the box. You know what I mean?
Well, I think for me, and again, it's a luxury and I'm not going to take it for granted, but I don't do things that I don't want to do. And I don't work for clients that I don't think I'm a good fit for or that I don't enjoy spending time with. Like I don't have to. We have a strong business. I have a great team. I know the minimum amount of business that we need to do for everyone to like be comfortable. And so life's too short to do stuff that you don't want to do if you have that flexibility and that luxury. And I do. And so I don't take on clients. I don't take on jobs. I don't take on work. I don't take on volunteer assignments or boards that I don't either get something out of myself or feel that I have something I can contribute that someone else couldn't. And I really enjoy that. It's part part of what's led me to get involved in the Realtor organization. I think that at the time I was asked to get involved locally, there was this question of, down in the greater Portland area, a lot of local municipal initiatives were taking place that would dramatically change how property rights are affected at the local level, having to do with zoning or rent control or certain requirements. And what we found interesting at the time, and what the president of the board at the time said was, it's easy to get realtors involved when there's a burning issue. Like when there's a campaign, when there's a meeting to go speak at. But how do you keep them interested and engaged and involved? Build that muscle in between those issues, because by the time the issue shows up on the city council agenda, or by the time that the ordinance is ready for its second reading, that's too late.
Yeah.
You need to stay engaged and involved. And as you know, as a working professional, it's a hard thing to be engaged in, especially when you don't know how the process works. And so I thought, hadn't had much interest in trade organizations and professional organizations. I got my education elsewhere. I went to seminars and conferences elsewhere. But to think about, how do we as an industry speak up for property owners? Because homeowners don't have their own association. We're kind of the voice for them. And so that was exciting to me. And so I've been excited to contribute in that way. And I've got to learn a lot. And
yeah, I think you and I I don't want to say unique, but let's say there's like 6,500 real estate agents in Maine, roughly. I would say probably less than 10% of those agents are actively showing up at things like planning board meetings or city council meetings, or getting involved in policy discussions. And I don't think that that's entirely because all of the rest don't want to do it. I think it's because maybe they haven't. There's certainly a big percentage that are just like, whatever. It's more about what's for me the next day, as opposed to what's for the community. Like at Pouliot Real Estate, it's selling homes, building community. A lot of that is flavored by my experience in having served 12 years in the legislature. So like today, as an example, I'm out on a property. And in Maine, now we can add more units to housing because of some changes in the legislature. It's great. But we're talking about septic design, right? And he's like, well, this is a 3-unit building, so you have to have 3 750-gallon tanks. I'm like, okay, well, there's only going to be 5 bedrooms in the building. He's like, yeah, but it's based on the unit count and then somewhat on the bedrooms and everything. I'm like, okay, so how many 5-bedroom farm homes have you done septic designs for where they just had like 1,000-gallon tank, or maybe 1,500 or whatever? Yeah. He's like, oh, many of them. I'm like, so my mind doesn't go to, oh, that's the rule, I'm going to have to figure out how to pay for it. Yes, I did that part. But my mind went to, geez, I'm on the Maine Real Estate Development Association Policy Committee. I'm going to have to bring it up to them that maybe we should bring up in the legislature that this should be modified, because the reality is not any more people living in that building than the 5-bedroom old farmhouse from the 1800s, and probably not going to be a strain. And people show up and say, oh, there's going to be crap everywhere if we do this. You know what I mean? But really probably not. And everything will be fine. But it's almost like a disease. In fact, the septic guy said to me, he's like, you have a disease. Like, you just want to like change these things. I'm like,
because it doesn't make any sense.
Well, somebody said this to me the other day. They're like, Matt, you're like a benevolent agitator. And I'm like, that's the best title anyone's ever given me, because it's not for my own project. Yeah, it'll help maybe one project down the road. But it's like, how many projects are being stopped because of these economic things that are baked into some law that people just took a black and white approach on?
Yeah. No, I've been told that I'm an activist. And I was like, well, yeah, but you're either an activist or a pacifist. You either like go along with it or you're going to do something to change it. It reminds me of when I was working for Governor LePage. I oversaw for quite a while the Bureau of Alcoholic Beverages and Lottery Operations, BABLO. And Greg Mineo and Tim Poulin were running it. And they had like an enforcement division, and just like with code enforcement or the inspectors that the cities have, like people think of themselves, I'm here to enforce the rule book. And I always used to try to say, yes, and you know the rule book better than anyone. A lot of people want to comply with it, they just don't know how. And so you either think of yourself as an educator, right? There was some bar in Portland that they were infusing their alcohols in these big glass jars, and they were letting it sit on the counter too long, and they were all excited to go bust them and find them. And I was like, well, do you think they know that they're doing it wrong? Because if they know and they're doing it to cut corners, that's one thing, but it's different at that. Or there was one situation where, again, in Portland, one of the breweries didn't have a license to be a restaurant. They just had a license to be a brewery. And they had a food truck that would park in their parking lot. and the food truck would sell food to people that were coming and going from the tasting room. I don't know if it was Rising Tide or who it was, but it was one of them. And because the serving of food on premises kind of crossed over to the licensing of the restaurant, they were like, we have to shut this down. And I just said to them, I said, why do you care? Like, why do you care? And they said, well, because the fairness, the licensing regime. And I said, well, okay, hold on. I want to get this straight. If that food truck was parked on the side of the road and not in their parking lot, but it was at the street, and people had to walk up to the side of the road in order to order from it, would that be okay? And they said, yeah, that wouldn't have any concerns. I said, but because they pulled into the parking lot, now all of a sudden it's in violation. They said, absolutely. And I said, well, what's in the best interest of the public? And they said, well, the best interest of the public is to be safer and in the parking lot. I said, well, what's in the best interest of the alcohol business, which, as you know, the state owns the alcohol business. They said, oh, it's probably to have them standing in the parking lot ordering there. And I said, then why do you care? Why is this what we're spending our time on? And we're not spending our time on the solution for what's in the best interest. We're spending our time on how we get this operator in trouble for something that they were trying to do to serve their customer.
I'm wondering, you're one of the brightest people that I know. Where does AI play into this in your mind, or have you thought about it? Maybe it's a fun rabbit hole to go down, because I think what we have is a very archaic system, and I don't want to stay on housing, but it relates to so many other things. I remember Operation Babygate, when they told Kushnock, hey, you make your own beer and you buy beer from other people, so you need to separate them in the
you have
cooler.
to have a door. Yeah.
It's like, what the heck? It's like, anyway, so we got
But
rid
I mean,
of that.
alcohol, I think that's a great way to think about like housing. So the housing issue, what becomes more difficult, particularly in Maine and in New England in general, is instead of having this one centralized enforcer, enforcement happens at the local level.
Yeah.
And so when the state legislature has passed a lot of their bills that are trying to increase density or whatever else, they left in a lot of local control. And Speaker Fecto at the time knew, when he was championing this legislation, that he would have to, he made some compromises that I don't think he should have to get his legislation through. But he knew that there was going to be ways like sewerage requirements that would allow people to slow it down.
Or
Because
like roof pitches.
Yeah, that enforcement happens at the local level. You have a lot of these people at the local level who see themselves as an enforcer, not an educator. Their job is to say no, not to say yes. And so until we find a way to streamline some of that, I think that's going to be a thing. I think your question about AI is interesting because honestly, like a lot of this stuff should be replicable and systematized. I mean, look at how long it took them to do the ranked choice runoff the other day. In 2026, there's no reason it should be such a manual process that requires so much, but everyone's worried about, can we trust it? And at the local control thing, I mean, local control is one of the hallmarks of how we govern ourselves in Maine and in New England, but it also prevents a lot of progress from happening. It's by design. We have to give up a little bit of that local control because that's one of the reasons why housing is expensive in Maine.
Yeah, over 9,000 jurisdictions in the United States, right? And we are looking at a bill going through the federal government, Road to Home, which hopefully President Trump, by the time this airs, will actually sign off on. And
he was supposed to sign it today, but it got through the House and the Senate.
And so in that, you have something that's going to allow for more industrialized construction, right, with manufactured homes. Okay, so Maine has passed, you can have a manufactured home on any single family building lot unless like the deed restriction says otherwise or something in a will or whatever, like some other more local thing. So the locals can't say no manufactured home on the single family home lot, but what they can say is, well, we require every single family home in this municipality to have a 612 pitch. Well, find me a manufactured home builder that does 612 pitch. They don't. They do 512. And it's industrialized construction. They're not going to stop their cookie cutter setup and make you a 612 pitch roof.
Our market's not big enough, right?
Right.
And the other thing is like all of the different municipalities having different rules means that I have builders that I work with who won't work in certain communities. They're like, these are the only towns I'll build in because I know the code enforcement officer, I know their regime, I know the things they're going to run into. And if I go to these other places, they charge these certain impact fees or they do this other stuff. We make it really hard for people to operate across these invisible town boundaries. And so the more that we can standardize it, I think the more we can build our way out of the housing shortage.
What I think is going to happen in time, and if I were, bored and looking for an enterprising opportunity, which I'm not, I'd be focused on creating some kind of AI resource that would take all the different codes, and I know there's some people that smarter people than I working on this, and build them in so that you could have a simple, does this apply to me or does it not? Like right now, I'm trying to do some renovations at my camp. It happens to be in a shoreline zone. All we want to do is take the bottom of the rotted shed off and put a new bottom on it, like not even moving it 1 inch. I mean, it might move an inch with the thing, but it's going to be largely like where it's been for the last 50 years, okay? And it's not clear to me whether or not I need to have a shoreline zoning application, which requires what are the setbacks from all the property lines? Are you disturbing more than 10 acres of feet of soil? Are you like, how tall is the building? All these different things that if it were just deemed to be a repair, which is I think what they're going to end up saying, none of it applies because they just let you repair without going through all of this. You know what I mean?
If you lift the whole thing up, is that a repair?
Yeah.
Like now that you've got it off.
Yeah, I don't know, right? Like exactly. And like in order
Yeah.
to get the answer to that question, you have to talk to the code officer who's there from 2:30 to 4:30 on Tuesday or 7:30 a.m. to 9:37 p.m. on Thursday, right? Like you get my point. And so I can't get a simple yes or no if I even need to fill out this application. Does it apply to me? And that just slows things down. And I'm not complaining. I'll figure it out, right? I guess maybe I'm complaining a little bit. But like the problem is that is the reason why we have this patchwork, 9,000 municipalities, all these different things. Does it apply? Does it not? That really slows down momentum. And if we're going to get serious about adding more housing, we have got to make it easier for people to make go, no-go decisions, you know? And I feel like AI
again,
can step
sometimes
in
having
there.
a clear no is just as valuable as having a
Totally,
clear yes.
yeah.
And like this gray area, I mean, it's unbelievable. Look at the Mill and J that Janet Mills vetoed the data center bill over, the moratorium over because she wanted to save this project. And the project couldn't even pencil anyway and couldn't move forward. So we had all this fight for no reason because people didn't realize because there were all these uncertainties in a deal. And I think that's in the real estate world, the more that you have certainty so that people can put together stacks of capital to be deployed against building housing, like that's what we really fundamentally need. We need more certainty. And so I think that's really, I think it's right. And I think AI can help with that. But what ends up happening again is you get these local personalities that want to make their town different and their town different in these certain ways. And they want to have different approaches to the same policy question. We run into it right now. I'm running my head against the wall on the local sprinkler ordinance in the town of Gorham. Gorham requires sprinklers, fire suppression sprinklers for every new housing unit, single family, 2 units. And it doesn't make a lot of sense. I understand the public policy justification for it is that no one's ever died in a house that had a sprinkler. But they also cause a lot of damage. They're hard systems. They're expensive. It increases the cost of housing. And so we're trying to do it. But if you go and you look at what the other decisions that other municipalities have made and you try to benchmark against them, it is there's so much variety. And you say for such a simple set of questions, how could so many different people do it so differently? And so standardization
it's
and
the reason
harmonization.
why, we haven't really talked about it much on this podcast, but things are kind of spinning up more with it with the company Atlas Building Composites that I have. The aha moment for me was, with additive manufacturing, you have the ability to bake in the code and print to whatever is going to be compliant, right? So in Maine, you may have a municipality, let's just say Oakland as an example, requires a 60-pound snow load. Next municipality over, which I don't know if snow just stops on the property line, I guess it does, it's 80 pounds, right? So with AI and also knowing what the code is, you can say, well, print me this snow load, here, and it's like, does the math and prints it out. I mean, we're not there as a company yet, but that's our vision of where we're going.
Creating a rules engine. That's like
because
dynamic and
otherwise, like we only have 5% of the construction in the United States being done industrialized because of what we've just spent the last 15 minutes talking about. It's impossible to set up an entire line like they do in Japan, where they have one national building code and just be able to crank out. And that's why they have 45 to 50% of their construction industrialized, because why would you not do that?
Well, democracy is a very expensive form of government, right? It makes everything more expensive. It also creates less certain, you look at the challenge about doing infrastructure. I drove up here from Gorham and I would have been here probably 15 minutes faster if they had put in that connector from South Portland to Gorham to get onto the turnpike to come up. But again, because of all of the land rights, which I support, as well as all of the democracy at the local and the state level, large scale infrastructure projects are really hard to get over the finish line because there are so many obstacles for them. And so it's a continued compromise we have to look at.
Yeah. I want to move to something that I think both you and I got an early start on. You know, you mentioned you bought your first home, I think you were 18 or got your first mortgage at that time. I bought my first home when I was 20. And I saw a post last night from a friend of mine who used to write for Forbes, and now she's doing a separate thing. But she was talking about the average age of the first time home buyer now being 40 years old. I mean, I'll be 40 in December. I've bought like probably 25 homes. You know, obviously more investments not to live in, but I figured it out, right? I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad when I was 20, and then I was like, I'm actually going to apply what it has. Went and bought a building, found out it wasn't a duplex, got through Board of Zoning Appeals, and got a variance to turn it into a duplex. All this stuff. There was essentially house hacking, right? And also, yeah, the acquisition price was $70,000, and the mortgage rates at that time were around 6. So fast forward 19 years, my sister bought a home from me. You know, first time home buyer in her early 20s. I'm not going to share the price, but it was multiples of what I paid, right? And it was like a stretch for them. They were only able to do it because they also house hacked. It was a duplex, right? And I think that part of the issue, I'm curious what you think about this kind of thesis, if you will, is that there is an unwillingness among young people to figure out like creative ways to get across the finish line in some cohorts, and then other cohorts just actually don't have the info. If they knew the info, they would undoubtedly apply it and go for it. But I wonder if we're at a point where we have to have like a come to Jesus moment around the fact that the way that it's always been done for the masses isn't going to work, or is there like some other kind of solution that I'm missing?
I think that it's a little of column A, a little of column B. I think there's also society decided to prioritize things like college, which is great, right? I'm a liberal arts, well-educated, all my Harvard degrees, whatever. I think that's a great pathway for people to be encouraged toward. However, there became this idea, and I think it was like our generation was kind of given like, delay certain things and focus on your education. I think that was the message we were given. That's why we have the student debt crisis. It's why we have a lot of people that maybe still at the age of 40 don't know what they want to do. They're now trying to settle down. It's why we have the infertility crisis. You know, there was a lot of, I think our parents' generation had a lot of unwanted pregnancies, teenage pregnancies. They were like, how do we reduce them? I know we'll get people oriented on waiting to have kids and not having unprotected sex or unwanted sex or all of that. They worked on all of that. But now here we are in our 40s where I have so many friends who are going for fertility treatment and they may or may not have had an easier time had they started their family earlier, but they were given this direction by society that they should wait. Wait to live your life, wait to like build your family until you achieve these other milestones first. So I think there's part of like what we as a society decide to prioritize you and center you toward, which I think, again, family used to be something that was what you were meant to build. And honestly, if you look at people at the end of their lives, or I was just at my 20th college reunion with all these high achieving Harvard kids, right? Mark Zuckerberg made a $500 million donation to Harvard during our reunion, which was insane.
Yeah, because you were the same class.
He was in my class, the same class as Mark Zuckerberg and Elise Stefanik and a bunch of other kind of people who've gone and done high profile, but a lot of people that have been, you know, hedge fund people or teachers or whatever. But the common theme that so many talked to them about in terms of what was most important to them or their success was their family, their kids, like where they're in life. They weren't focused on the career or the money, and I guess there's probably a level of comfort you have to have for that to be your thing. But it's so
like
fundamental.
They're definitely operating at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
But I also wonder if people that are at the bottom of that too, if you have the strong foundation of your family and of where you live and owning your home earlier on, if you take care of that and you build that as your foundation and then you layer the other things over, which one comes first? And so we've kind of delayed the American dream as a side effect from focusing on prioritizing something else sooner. And so I think that that's part of it. And then I think this knowledge gap is a big thing. We don't teach. And I know when you served in the legislature, you tried several times to champion financial literacy as mandatory to the main curriculum. And even if they ever passed it, they always cheated to try to figure out how to not do it.
Oh, trust me. I just had this conversation at board meeting last week.
You focus on that. But here's what it reminds me of, though, when we talk about teachers. So they would talk about why math scores were falling. And one of the reasons why they said math scores were falling was because so many people that went into teaching were themselves uncomfortable in math when they were students. And so there was an emphasis on training teachers to teach math and think about math and feel more comfortable with math. We should be doing the same thing when it comes to personal finance. And Maine is one of the only states that I don't think has any sort of like preferential like educator financing for homeownership.
Right, no.
We don't have first responder. We don't have, there's a bunch of other stuff we don't. But I was thinking, this is just a random idea that I have. We should do some sort of, let's do an educator, like, have Maine Housing run a, it could be 1% or 0.25% less rate to give educators who don't get paid enough. We can all agree that our teachers are paid less than what they deserve. Let's give them a preferred product, but let's make some sort of educational component for them in order to qualify for it. They need to learn about the importance of it. And by the way, that will like clear the path to including more of that education in the formative years. There's so much of your life that gets spent dealing with the consequences of your credit score. It's criminal that we don't teach kids what it is, how it's calculated, and how it's going to impact you. The fact that, if you want to build generational wealth, there's never been a way to do it that didn't involve real estate in some way. We should be teaching kids when they're young how to invest in real estate. And then even if that means just their primary home, the difference between owning and renting. The statistic you gave about, being age 40 for your first home, there are statistics that I think like the average like wealth of a person who's a renter versus a homeowner, I think the average for a renter is like in the single thousands of dollars. And for a homeowner, it's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars in terms of their personal wealth. It makes a big difference. So one of my most successful clients recently, he's maybe 19 and he got his CDL license and he's driving truck. He's picking up every overtime shift that he can. And he called me up and he said, like, I know that it's stupid to pay rent. Why am I making someone else rich? Why am I paying someone else's mortgage? And so I can't afford much. I can't go over $300,000, which in, again, Greater Portland won't buy you a lot. But, he said, I'll go out to Baldwin and I'd like to be in Baldwin because I want to be able to park my truck. I want to be able to have space. And so I was able to sell him this old farmhouse with a lot of land. It needed work, but he said, I'm going to figure it out. I can watch videos on YouTube and TikTok. I can get my dad or my friends to help me. I'll learn how to do certain things. And this kid, by the way, has already now got $100,000 worth of equity that he didn't have when he started a year ago. And he's well ahead of many of these people in their 40s who've been paying $2,000, $2,500 a month in rent and have nothing to show for it. And when you help people realize how much money they spend in rent over the course of their lives, if you're spending $2,000 a month in rent, that's $24,000 a year. That's $100,000 over 4 years. That's $250,000 over 10 years that you've given to someone else that you could be investing in yourself and your family and your future. And so if we taught people that early, if we got people in on it earlier, you've seen what's happened to property values. Of course, those of us who lived through the downturn realized that when we hit our height and everything started falling in 2008, it took until 2012 for it to bottom out, took until 2017 for it to get back to where it was in 2008. But then between 2017 and 2022, it doubled.
Well, I have to run this by you just to play devil's advocate at the risk of sounding really weird on a real estate podcast when I own a real estate company.
Yeah.
But you're smart enough to understand what I'm saying, which is everybody in America pays rent, even homeowners. It's called property taxes.
Sure.
So also, what about like home maintenance and insurance and all these other things, right? Like, have you in your studies done an analysis on like what the break even might be? I haven't, just candidly, and if you haven't, I wouldn't blame you. But like, there's got to be like some kind of break even point. I've seen some people say, well, buying isn't for everybody, and maybe what we're seeing is a transition with millennials wanting to pay more for lifestyle experiences instead of like paying to make sure their oil furnace just doesn't get fixed.
Yeah, I haven't done the calculations, but homeownership isn't for everyone. A home is an asset, so it's really about asset management, right? And so either you do it yourself or you hire people to do it. So if you don't have the ability to do it yourself or the means to have someone else do it, maybe being a renter is what makes sense for you. If there are other reasons for your lifestyle, then it doesn't make sense. But the overwhelming majority of people can do it, and they should do it. And way more people that could. It's just they don't think about it. They don't think about the consequences. And I do think that the baby boomer generation designed society around themselves and their own needs, and at every turn in the road has rewritten figure in the rules to benefit themselves at the expense of future
I
generations.
got to be careful what I say on this podcast because I might want to run for office someday. But man, it's
Not you.
really a challenge. It's really a challenge to live in a world. And I remember Senator Harrington actually saying this at one point, and it just didn't really land with me because I started, buying property at a young age, and I kind of hacked it and maybe lucked out, blessed out, a combination. But like, I feel like I've gotten a pound of flesh, right, out of like the system that existed, and not through, it was work, but he mentioned something one time. He's like, it's just like really frustrating when I'm told by people who are, of the baby boomer generation, just to like pull up your bootstraps and figure it out, because we did too. He's like, you guys played by totally different rules. I mean, we're sitting in a space right now that if it was 1970, there'd be 5 golf simulators in here. Well, it wasn't a thing in 70, but like there would be a business going in here. And there's no business in here because of one thing. Stupid ADA requirement to have a Lula lift to get in. I mean, we could carry people in or something, you know what I mean, in the case that it happens that they need to get in for accessibility, but that stuff wasn't on the books, right? So some of these things like that is good to help open it up to more to the masses. I respect that. What I don't respect is when people are like, no. Why? Because I don't want that next door to me. Why? Because it's going to be ugly. Well, okay, wait a second. I think I just heard you oversay at the coffee lounge a couple of weeks ago, you can't figure out why your grandkids can't buy a house. It's like, maybe stop saying no to these changes to protect your own thing at the expense of the future generations. It's like the first time ever in America where this generation won't have it better than the previous generation.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to be, and the millennials, we've kind of got our own. They've made the bed, we're going to lay in it. I think the generation coming up behind us, I think Gen Z is having a different reaction. And so that's going to be where we really find out what was important, what we got right, what we got wrong. I think part of it also has to do with the pitch for everyone to take out debt to go to college without regard to how much money you could make after you graduated from college. Because I think that's one of the things that's also delayed the American dream, delayed people's ability to qualify for loans. And even in this whole conversation in the last administration, the Biden administration, about student loan forgiveness, no one ever talked about where that money went. Like they were like, oh, we as a taxpayer should forgive it. It's like, but the money went somewhere. It got paid to these higher education institutions that all took the money and did something other than invested in the students that got their degrees. And so there's a reckoning coming there as well. But honestly, like, it kind of what you were saying about Matt Harrington's comment. Yeah, I mean, it's frustrating to say you had it easier then, but I also like to say that, like the best time to buy a house was 10 years ago. Yeah. The second best time is today. I mean, you can only really do with what you have, and there's always opportunity.
Go back in time.
And so, yeah, there might be more, but I mean, look, this building that you have here in Augusta, like it would cost 10 times as much in Portland, which means that if what your desire is to own a whole building, to do a transformation, understand how to apply tax credits, maybe you can't do it in Portland or South Portland or Falmouth. But if you're willing to drive to Lewiston, or if you're willing to go outside of your comfort zone or further than, the opportunity is still there for people that are willing to do the work. And so it's, there's a balance between comfort and ambition and desire and like goal setting and actually achieving it. So I think opportunities exist.
This is kind of a fun thing to do this conversation with you.
Because I'll go anywhere.
Yeah. You're willing to cover all these different topics, but also I'm curious what you think about this, that I think Maine suffers from a disease called apathy, and that there is a lot of people who, just want to be like content. And there's different levels of content. Like I want to be content with my family life and like different things, but like aspirationally from like what kind of mark you're going to leave on this world, or are you going to keep driving by that field saying it would be cool if somebody would do something there? Well, it's like, it's America. Like, why don't you do something there? And would you agree with that, or am I crazy that maybe this parochial mindset has kind of seeped in and created this entrenchment of apathy that is keeping us from growing maybe more than we would?
I don't know that I agree with that. I think apathy is obviously a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like it kind of like grows on itself. And maybe there are communities in which that's more true than others. I think like if you look for it, that's what you see. But I think if you also look around, you'll see there's a lot of, I mean, just look at where we're sitting right now in downtown Augusta, the innovation that's happened here over the last decade, and it's unrecognizable from what it was, but it's also very different than it was 50 years ago. So there's always reinvention. I don't know. It's interesting. When I was in business school, I did a short leadership development internship at Unum. And one of the things that they commented on then, though, was that there is a culture in parts of Maine and in some populations of Maine that like contentment is something to seek after. And so it's actually a good thing is that you like figure out where you want to be, what you want your life to look like, and you've reached it and like you're fine there. And like that's great. Like if you figure that out, that's not apathy. That's so much as it is like contentment. And that's a good thing to strive after. And they said, as an employer in Maine, where you have a smaller labor pool to draw from, one of the things they had to figure out was how to be okay with a model where people would sometimes reach their potential and want to stay there and weren't always on a journey of trying to climb a ladder. And so how do you build a culture around celebrating people's strengths and continuing to keep them there in long-term employment in an area where they were happy and that they were good? And so I think that sometimes, I mean, there's just probably a disbursement of the population into different buckets, some that are like reach where they want to be and they're happy there, some that are like more ambitious, some that are more innovative, some that take risks. I think the thing that you're speaking about that I probably do agree with is that there are sometimes structural barriers for the people that do want to do things and do want to see it change or want to make success. And we've erected a lot of barriers to allowing them to be successful.
Yeah, that's more what I was referring to.
And I think that's really like, you're talking about the NIMBYism of it all. I always joke that I haven't met someone yet who doesn't want to be able to do short-term rentals at their own house or have an ADU at their house, but they also will object if their neighbor wants to do it. They're like, I don't want my neighbor to do it, but I want to be able to do it for myself, but I don't want them to be able to.
Maybe the real disease is hypocrisy.
I mean, there's hypocrisy, there's fear of the unknown, there's all this other stuff. So, I mean, it's hard to balance all of these other things. And real estate is a world where you see it come into focus because all of these things matter, right? Like a client of mine was buying this lot that they wanted to do a commercial use on. And it was in a new zone in Gorham, right on the Westbrook line, where the town wanted to see innovative multi-use and commercial was great. And they just wanted a small storefront. And the sewer line didn't go past it yet. And they hope that it does sometime in the future. And the lot was just like a little small, but in theory, you could fit septic on it and you'd be able to do it. And there were all of these weird idiosyncrasies in how they wrote this specific zone to foster development that blocked it to doing it. And we got the town council to, on pretty fast track, because I know what I'm doing, to change and amend the code to allow it to happen. But when they did it, they changed something else that meant that it still couldn't happen. And then they'd have to tie into the public sewer, which didn't go by it yet. And so we found a new way to make it happen. And there was a new hurdle. And we just have to be a little bit more solution oriented. You know, Mark Dion is currently the mayor of Portland, and he told a story when he first became mayor, and I think it's still true, that there was a certain business that he wanted to locate in Portland and open in Portland. And so he kind of tried to roll out the red carpet for them, and he tried to go around and show them different sites and things that would work for him. And they seemed really excited about it, and they shook hands and they left. And a few weeks went by and he didn't hear anything back from them. And he finally reached out and said, "Hey, just want to know, like, I've asked the city, you haven't pulled any permits, like nothing seems to be happening." And they said, "Oh, we're already up and running on our new project in Westbrook," because not only did Westbrook roll out the red carpet for us, they showed us the process that we could get from start to finish and how it'd be certain and how we could move forward. And so they located their investment in Westbrook and they got up and running in a process that would have taken like 18 to 24 months in Portland. They were able to do in probably like 3 months in Westbrook. Paul LePage always used to say, like, capital goes where it's welcome, it stays where it's appreciated. And I think that's kind of what we see happening in Maine. There are certain places that have figured out how to make it easier to do business, make it easier to develop, make it easier to build housing. And that's where it happens. And the places that have erected barriers are seeing the impact of that. And maybe they want it. Maybe they want. Cape Elizabeth doesn't want low-income people living in their town. They think it's going to change the character. I think that's wrong. I think it's hypocritical. I think that we need our teachers and our police officers to live somewhere. And
it's hard not to get more political in this discussion because you and I are both on the same side of the ledger, if you will. But
some days.
Some days, yeah. I've been accused of not being conservative enough by you, but
Same. I've also been.
But you know, it is fun to listen to people come and just be like, "Oh, we need to help everybody, but not next door to me." I mean,
but
you've
not
alluded
here.
to it.
It was like, you know, when I won't give the political example, but there are a lot of times at which people like act inconsistently with their values, and their value is, like you said, I want my kids to be able to afford to live here or move here, and then they are like barriers to being able to do that. That is one of the things I'm excited about this piece of legislation we were talking about that's moving its way to the president's desk, is that there are a lot of structural barriers they're trying to remove. There are types of regulatory reviews they're trying to streamline. There are types of funding they're trying to set aside and grant and loan programs that allow people to do renovations or conversions of vacant properties into housing stock, and incentives. And so hopefully using incentives in order to get people to streamline, we can build more because we need it.
Hey, we're getting toward the end here, but I want to talk about something. You were recently named the 2026 Realtor of the Year by the Greater Portland Board of Realtors. And I'm curious, you know, given your life experience and the myriad of things that you could have done and what you ultimately decided to do, what does that mean to you?
Honestly, for my board, for my business, being Realtor of the Year, they all know that I, for several years, asked them not to give me the award because I think that sometimes people like myself who are drawn to accomplishment and achievement, and I've had a lot of them in my life, I don't really look to win any new awards anymore. But for me, it was important to recognize some of the things that we and the team that I was working with have achieved. And I've been pushing the Association of Realtors, both at the local, the state, and the national level, to be really focused on our members and our value, and also on the communities and the people we serve. And I think that some of the unfortunate headlines they've had in the news about realtors have been because so much of, you know, what people see on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok about realtors is how much money they make and what kind of cars they drive. But really, like, I think there's so much that we do that invest in communities. I was talking about the grant that, you know, we got from the Realtor organization was a placemaking grant to build a space that allows the community to gather. Well, the grant we got was only $7,500. So I went and knocked doors to every realtor in town, every office. And I said, hey, we got to double it. So I got 10 offices to each write a check for $750 each. So we gave a $15,000 contribution to what was a $60,000 project. That's now meaningful. And it gets a project done that the town wasn't going to fund before. It makes it happen. I was able to organize us to bring people together to do things like train realtors on how to show up to testify on ordinances. A lot of people, realtors, we talk all day in people's homes, but people are afraid to stand at a microphone in front of the city council. I'm like, well, you already know where the town hall is because you go and you pull the code file. It's not much different to go and speak and to feel comfortable doing it, but people get busy and they forget. So for me, really, I appreciated the honor because it looked at what I've done for the community, what I've done for the Realtor organization. But what I see it as a reflection of is where I hope realtors are going in general, which is staying focused on the value we create for our clients, for our communities, and for our profession. And as AI transforms so many different industries, we know that in the professional services world, it'll transform that. There's got to be this human connection, this human relationship, and the sense of the value that we bring. And I'm really committed to that. And so
I think, frankly, it's the only way the industry stays alive.
Yeah.
Because, like, you can have Claude Cowork do so much stuff for you, including, like, hey, Claude, how do I buy a house? Okay, what do I offer? Okay, what do I do, right? But, like, I've had a lot of people say to me, Matt, you're not really a real estate agent. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, you're really more like a therapist. And it's that, it's really they trusted me enough to share with me their personal information, how they feel about things, their emotions associated with it. Like, there's no way, well, maybe I'll be wrong about this, and my kids are going to listen to this someday and be like, Dad was so old school.
They're definitely going to say that.
Yeah, but like that somehow that there's going to be that level of human intuition, if you will, from AI. Maybe it'll happen. Maybe they can code it or whatever, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but to really come alongside somebody as another human being, you know, and look them in the eye and be like, hey, I appreciate what you did to help me with this, you know?
But some days you're a therapist. Some days you're a matchmaker. Some days you're a problem solver. I mean, every day you're a problem solver.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much to it that you gain from experience and that you gain from having relationships. But the big thing about real estate, the profession that we're in with housing, is that it is in the physical world. And yeah, I know that AI and robotics are going to bring that all into the physical world as well. And so maybe we'll all end up just living in the Matrix. But I do think that the human connection and the physical component is unique about what we do. And then there's all the like financing and the regulation and having to navigate all of it that for now, at least, I think there's still a very central role. So I think the people who are successful in our industry in the next 5 to 10 years, or maybe let's say 2 to 5 years, since everything's changing so quickly, are going to be the people that figure out how to embrace and incorporate the ability to do what they do at scale without losing that kind of personal lens and that reason why.
Yeah, that's awesome. So looking ahead, when you think about the future of housing, what gives you the most optimism, and what do you see as kind of like the biggest challenges on the horizon?
The most optimism, I think, honestly, watching this play out right now in Washington, housing is one of the only issues where there's broad bipartisan acknowledgement, support, willingness to work together to address some issues that we've let fester for decades. And I appreciate that it's getting the attention of policymakers at the local, state, and federal level. And so I think it's a huge opportunity, and it gives me great optimism. It also says that it's the forefront of everyone's mind. What also makes me nervous is 2 pieces to that. One, when you get attention, be careful what you wish for, because now that everyone's focused on it, it's easy to go back the other way and to start putting up barriers again. We also know, if you look at like veterans and supporting veterans, like the pendulum swings one way and then it swings pretty hard back the other way, where all of a sudden you are flooded with more resources than you need for a short period of time, but then you lose focus and you fall out of it. And so I think there's also likely to be this feeling that, oh, well, we did something and we addressed it and now we don't have to worry about it anymore. It's constant and we have to stay in front of it. The other thing that I do worry about is that, the American dream of owning real estate, of owning a home, has come out of reach for certain people as prices have continued to go up. This talk of a 50-year mortgage, I thought was
crazy. It's
better than renting. So if there were no other option, then I guess it's better than nothing. But and in the idea that you would find a way to refinance it later. But we should be trying to, again, empower people sooner. The last piece that does concern me is, with the rise of populism, there are other theories about how property could be held and owned. I believe that a lot of the policies we've seen that have been tried in places like Portland's trying and experimenting with some policies promoted by the Democrat Socialists of America. I think some of those are well-intentioned. They're trying to lower the cost of housing, lower the cost of having a roof over your head. But I think that they're having unintended consequences of making housing more expensive. And so the working poor that they're intended to help, I'd like to get the working poor to become the working homeowners that then have a pathway to wealth.
Capitalism is an asymmetric system, and once you teach people the rules of the game, it's only themselves or maybe a mental or physical disability that would be keeping them from participating.
In the rent control debate, everyone wants to talk about renters versus landlords, and I'm like, but I don't see the renter as a renter forever. I see them as someone that we want to turn into a buyer and turn into a homeowner so that they can then become the landlord. But if you have this worldview where there's a lower class and we're going to focus on them, it ignores social mobility, which is so possible. And so I worry about the rise in populism kind of trying to throw out the rule book because they think it's rigged against the lower class, when actually I think what we should be doing is we should be building ladders, we should be building literacy, we should be building pathways for people to be able to climb up and out of their current situation and find their way to a more prosperous future.
Yeah, I love it. Aaron, this has been a very wide-ranging and intellectually stimulating conversation. I always appreciate your time and, more importantly, your commitment to both your community and the state of Maine. And I'm really thrilled to see what's going on for you. It's so exciting and, frankly, an inspiration to me to up my game. You do just such a good job on the real estate front. Everybody deserves to work with a professional like you. So thank you for what you do.
Well, thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to be here, to be on this side of the interview couch too.
It's fun. Nice. On the end here, for folks who want to learn more about you and what you've got going on, or how they might seek you out if they need some help with real estate, where can they find you?
Yeah, they can visit our website for Demetria Real Estate at buymaine.com. That's B-U-Y, as in if you want to buy a house, buymaine.com, or find us on LinkedIn or Instagram or anywhere that you go. Well, that's where we'll be.
Clever for getting that web address. That's awesome. Buymaine.com.
that's what I want everyone to do. And by the way, even though I don't sell everywhere in Maine, my license works everywhere in Maine. And just like we were talking before, you bought your camp because another agent introduced you to it.
Yeah.
And so it's a great community. I feel very fortunate to be in a profession. It's a funny profession because we're all competitors, right? You're always like competing for the next deal, for less, whatever. But you have to be on the other side of a transaction from someone, and you can treat it adversarially, win, lose, but that doesn't take you very far. Once you realize that we're all in this together, we're all working for the best interest of our clients, we're trying to create those win-wins. And that's how we are as an industry and a community. That's what will take you further. And that's what I look forward to.
I love it, man. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.